let's see, a year ago, I spoke to you in more detail about this concept of acceptance. So you see, I've kind of brought you along the trail. We started with information, we talked about the importance of managing your life as a caregiver, we talked about dealing with how hard it is to be human, then I started introducing this idea that you gotta let go. And that's where acceptance comes in. And I pointed out in November of 2010 that there are basically 3 levels of acceptance that you have to deal with. First, in the early stages of the illness, acceptance is believing that the changes you're seeing are in fact an illness and are part of a progressive illness. Coming to terms with that is huge, because it's life-changing, as you all now know if you're sitting in this room. Accepting that and being willing to look at where it's going to go is tremendously hard. When Clark was introducing me and kind enough to point out that the early stage group is not for everyone, it isn't, because we talk very openly about where this illness goes and what you need to do to be ready for that. And it's not easy. Not easy to think about that. Certainly not easy to live with. So the first stage of acceptance is the intellectual acceptance. This is an illness, this is going to happen, and I need to be ready for it. The second level of acceptance is as the illness progresses, you have to accept the painful emotional reality that your partner is permanently changed. Now they're still standing there, they still look every bit like the person you know them to be, but they're permanently changed. And yeah, it's not a straight line. I know you're going to say, yeah, but some days I see that old pal of mine. And you do. But that is not real. That is not constant. That happens to be a neuron that was still plugged in. You have to be ready for those neurons to unplug. And finally, the third stage of acceptance is acknowledging that your loved one is a seriously ill patient and understanding all of the limitations that go with that. People will fairly easily talk about hospice services in terminal cancer. They'll have that discussion early on in the process. But it's very hard for caregivers to think about that with dementia. Because oftentimes a physically healthy person is sitting next to you. And so the idea of what you see versus serious terminal illness doesn't match. And emotionally, you don't want to accept that anyway. I will argue, as I did back then, that it's understanding that there is no tomorrow, accepting that there is no tomorrow with this illness, in the sense of it's going to get better. It's accepting that opens the door to having the best today. Those professional caregivers, why do they do it over and over without seeming to be in despair? It's because they're not looking at the person 10 years ago. They don't know that person from 10 years ago. They see the person before them and hopefully are doing their best to make them comfortable today. As a loved one and caregiver, that is a huge problem. Those two things do not go together. And so allowing yourself, maybe sometimes forcing yourself to see that, very painful, but ultimately allows you to function much more comfortably in the real world of the day you're in. And I wish you could be up here with me. I should go sit down. Because you would be seeing some of the knowing faces in this room right now. Some of you, I'm sure, are appalled. And I think, if I remember, when I gave this talk, maybe she's here today, a lovely lady stormed up here and made it very clear to me that I was blaspheming. And it does seem like blasphemy. It's a terrible thought, because it almost sounds like I'm saying give up. I'm saying forsake your loved one. And please understand that has nothing to do with this. Acceptance is simply loving the person in front of you, not loving the history, the memory of the person that is no longer there.